People can, of course, find allegories if they wish to, but as you can see, it was wholly outside his conception of what he was doing in what he called fantasy. The world he created exists for itself and for what it tells you and for what delight it gives you. It may, of course, contain, as indeed it does, elements of his own comprehension, his view of the world at large, but not anything out of the primary world. Just as it contains no specific reference to the Christian religion, it actually contains no specific reference to communism or fascism, absolutely not. His view of such things, if available at all, will be in solution in the secondary mythical or mythological world that he has created, but not actually itself. Therefore, it is in no sense an allegory. The double meaning is not present.
It might come as no surprise to you by now, but I'm a huge fan of J.R.R. Tolkien, the author of The Lord of the Rings, and I really admire his writing style and approach to creating a story. In the clip we just watched, his son Christopher discusses his father's dislike for allegory, and I wanted to explore this a little bit more to help you write a more effective and long-lasting book that will be interesting for generations to come. Let's get started. First of all, what is allegory exactly? Simply, an allegory is a second explicit meaning behind a text. This is where your story makes direct comparisons between any fantastical element it contains and that of the real world. Typically, these are usually moral lessons, such as the Christian message in C.S. Lewis's Narnia series, or the political message in Animal Farm by George Orwell. So, what's the problem with allegory? Well, this all feeds back to one of the most important rules in writing: show, don't tell. Your story should aim to be broad and accepting of different views, so that anybody can pick it up and apply whatever message they perceive to be there. You want to avoid telling your reader how to feel. All of this is best demonstrated, not by being explained by me, but by the man himself.
As for any inner meanings or message, it has in the intention for the author none. It is neither allegorical nor topical. I cordially dislike allegory in all its manifestations, and always have done so since I grew old and wary enough to detect its presence. I much prefer history, true or feigned, with its varied applicability to the thought and experience of readers. I think that many confuse applicability with allegory, but the one resides in the freedom of the reader, and the other in the purposed domination of the author.
This is to mean that, according to Tolkien, focusing on applicability allows the reader to have the freedom to imagine what the story is about and what lessons can be garnered from it. They are then free to apply that to their own life without the intervention of the author. Allegory, on the other hand, Tolkien says, is more about the author dominating the reader by promoting explicit messages. All of this isn't to say that allegory is a bad thing necessarily. Indeed, some of the most successful works ever produced contain memorable allegories that help us understand complicated themes or ideas, such as Plato's Cave, Newton's Apple, or the Bible. Allegory has a strong range of utility. However, we should also recognize that these are primarily used to help people understand concepts such as democracy, existence, or gravity. Or they are used to promote a point of view held by the author. This can be massively entertaining and intriguing if you share that point of view, such as Lewis's Christian faith or Orwell's anti-totalitarian stance. But there is a risk of manipulation and abuse there if done by the wrong people. Examples should be obvious. One of the principal risks of engaging in allegory for storytelling and making them a core component of your story is that when you focus on so much on the message or secondary meaning, the characters or story you're trying to tell tend to suffer as they become shoehorned into supporting the secondary narrative rather than the one they're actually involved in. This can make characters feel hollow, contrived, and unnatural. In the end, the best writers are able to do a bit of both, or at least recognize that they cannot completely separate their own thoughts and ideas from their works that they're creating. The most successful works in history have applicable but not explicit allegories that allow them to be interpreted, debated, and enjoyed by people of any background and in any time period, because they are able to apply their own meaning to it without being wrong. When you pin an allegorical meaning to a work and make it an integral part of the enjoyment, you risk alienating your audience if they disagree or view it differently. Maybe you have a message you want to communicate, or you don't care if everybody likes your message. There's no problem there. Tolkien wanted to promote ideas of hope, and his Catholic upbringing clearly had an influence. But importantly, he never told his readers what his books meant or how they should see them, and he went to great pains to avoid any obvious parallels being drawn. Ultimately, beating people over the head with unashamedly explicit ideas and telling them that this is the correct view has a tendency to make people resist that notion because people simply don't like being told what to do and think. The more strongly you impose your allegory, the more you're fighting the human desire to think freely.
So, I want to emphasize one more time that allegory isn't necessarily bad, and it can almost be unavoidable to include things from the real world in the story that you're trying to create. However, what I really admire about Tolkien's work is how long-lived it is and how admired it is by different generations across different time periods. And I think a huge part of this is credit to Tolkien for trying to avoid allegory. So, I hope this is useful for you and explores a little bit more how you can be an extremely successful writer by trying to tone down the messaging within your story and just focus on the characters and their journey. Please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing the video with your friends. Thank you very much.